Have you ever trusted someone completely, only to discover that trust was a weapon they used against you? Picture this. You're standing in a private room at an upscale restaurant, staring at photographs spread across a table. Intimate photographs, medical photographs, of you. And the man sitting across from you, a complete stranger with cold eyes and an expensive suit, is watching your reaction like he's studying a specimen. Your hands shake, your vision blurs, and the only question screaming through your mind is, how did he get these? 3 weeks earlier, Natalia Reeves had no idea her life was about to implode. At 24, she'd built a careful, organized existence in Chicago. She worked as a bookkeeper for a small nonprofit that provided housing assistance to low-income families, lived in a modest studio apartment in Lakeview, and spent her weekends video calling her parents in Ohio and meeting her college friends for brunch. She was proud of her independence, her stability, her privacy. She'd worked hard for all of it, putting herself through state school with scholarships and part-time jobs, graduating with minimal debt and maximum determination. Her life wasn't glamorous, but it was hers. Safe, predictable, exactly how she liked it. The appointment was supposed to be routine. Her insurance had changed when the nonprofit switched providers, which meant finding a new primary care physician. The clinic near her apartment had good reviews online and accepted her insurance, so she booked an annual checkup without much thought. Just another box to check off her carefully maintained to-do list. Dr. Werner had seemed professional enough. Mid-50s, graying hair, wire-rimmed glasses, the kind of bland competence that inspired neither trust nor suspicion. He'd gone through the standard examination, asked the usual questions about her medical history, lifestyle, stress levels. Everything normal, everything fine, until he'd noticed the birthmark on her lower back, a irregularly shaped mark about 2 inches across that she'd had since birth. He'd frowned slightly, asked her to remain on the examination table while he took a closer look. She'd complied, lying face down in the paper gown, feeling the familiar vulnerability of medical examination. Then he'd said he wanted to take documentation photos for her records. Completely standard procedure for distinctive markings, he'd explained. In case there were any changes over time, they'd have a baseline for comparison. It made sense. She'd nodded her agreement, heard the click of a camera, felt the cool air on her exposed skin. The whole thing took maybe 3 minutes. Then he'd helped her sit up, told her everything looked fine, nothing concerning, just wanted it documented properly. She'd gotten dressed, checked out at the front desk, walked home thinking about what to make for dinner. She hadn't thought about those photographs again. Why would she? They were medical records. Private. Protected. Safe. That sense of safety shattered on a Tuesday evening 3 weeks later. Natalia was sitting on her couch, laptop balanced on her knees while she reconciled expense reports from the previous quarter, when her phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. She almost ignored it. Spam texts were constant these days, everything from fake package delivery notifications to phishing attempts. But something made her look. Maybe instinct. Maybe fate. Maybe just bad luck. The message contained no words. Just a photo attachment. She tapped it without thinking, expecting some random image that would confirm it was spam. Instead, her own face stared back at her. No, not her face. Her body. Her back. Her birthmark. The paper gown pulled down to expose her lower back and part of her hip. The angle slightly wider than she remembered, showing more skin than seemed necessary for documenting a birthmark. And in the corner, a timestamp and clinic logo. Her medical photo. Her private, supposedly protected medical photo. In the hands of someone with an unknown number. The laptop slid off her knees. Her hands started shaking so violently, she nearly dropped the phone. She stared at the screen, unable to process what she was seeing, her mind racing through impossible explanations. A mistake. A wrong number. Some kind of clerical error. But the timestamp was from her appointment. The angle was from that examination table. The birthmark was unmistakably hers. Another text came through. Just an address. No explanation. No demands. Just a location in downtown Chicago and a time, 8 p.m. tonight. Natalia's first instinct was to call the police. She did, hands still shaking as she tried to explain the situation to the board officer who answered the non-emergency line. Someone had obtained her private medical photographs. They were texting them to her. She felt violated, exposed, terrified. The officer asked if there were any threats. No, she admitted. Any demands for money? No. Any indication of who sent them or what they wanted? No. He told her that without evidence of a specific crime, there wasn't much they could do. She could file a report if she wanted, but honestly, it sounded like maybe a clinic employee sent them to her by mistake, probably trying to send them to her insurance company for her file. Had she asked the clinic about it? She should start there. She hung up feeling more helpless than before. The police weren't going to help. Fine. She'd go to the clinic herself, demand answers, threaten legal action if necessary. She was good at organizing, at solving problems, at taking action. This was just another problem to solve. Except her hands wouldn't stop shaking and her stomach felt like it was full of ice water, and she couldn't stop seeing that photo every time she closed her eyes. The clinic was closed by the time she got there, but she returned first thing the next morning, walking through the doors with her phone clutched in her hand like evidence. The receptionist, a young woman with perfect makeup and a practiced smile, listened to her explanation with increasing detachment. Natalia showed her the text message, the photo, demanded to know how someone outside the clinic had obtained her private medical images. The receptionist's smile never wavered. She said she'd pass the concern along to the office manager, but she was sure there was some reasonable explanation. Their records were completely secure. Maybe Natalia had shared the photos herself and forgotten. Maybe her insurance company had sent them. Maybe she should speak with her phone provider about potential hacking. Natalia had left feeling dismissed, patronized, and increasingly certain that something was very wrong. The receptionist's complete lack of concern wasn't normal. The deflection wasn't normal. The suggestion that Natalia herself was somehow responsible wasn't normal. She'd worked in nonprofit administration long enough to recognize stonewalling when she saw it. They weren't going to help her. They weren't going to investigate. They weren't going to admit anything was wrong. That night, alone in her apartment with every lock checked twice and her curtains drawn tight, Natalia stared at her phone. The unknown number had sent the address again. Same location. Same time. 8 p.m. She pulled up the address on her map app. It was a restaurant in River North, upscale Italian place with white tablecloths and a Michelin star. Not the kind of location she associated with danger or threats. But then again, she had no idea what this was. Who would have her photos? What did they want? Why contact her like this? Every logical bone in her body screamed not to go. Meeting an unknown person who had obtained her private medical photos was insane. Dangerous. Stupid. She should ignore it, block the number, maybe hire a lawyer, definitely not walk into some mystery situation alone. But anger was beginning to cut through her fear. Someone had violated her privacy, had images of her that were supposed to be protected, and the authorities weren't helping. The clinic wasn't helping. No one was helping. So maybe, just maybe, going to this meeting would give her answers that nobody else would provide. Have you ever had to choose between staying safe in the dark or walking into danger to find the truth? Between accepting violation or demanding answers? Drop your state in the comments and tell me what you would do. Sometimes the scariest choice is the only way forward. Natalia dressed carefully that evening, choosing jeans and a sweater that felt like armor, practical boots in case she needed to run. She told herself she was being paranoid. She told herself she'd stay in public areas. She told herself she could leave at any time. She told herself a lot of things as she took the train downtown, walked the 3 blocks to the restaurant, pushed through the heavy front door into warm lighting and the smell of garlic and wine. The hostess smiled at her, professional and polished. Did she have a reservation? Natalia hesitated, then said she was meeting someone. The hostess's smile shifted slightly, knowing, and she said, yes, Mr. Moretti, right this way. She led Natalia through the main dining room, past tables of well-dressed couples and business dinners, toward a hallway in the back. A private room, she explained. Mr. Moretti preferred privacy for his business meetings. Natalia's heartbeat accelerated with every step. This was insane. She should turn around. She should leave. But her feet kept moving, following the hostess down the hall to a closed door. The hostess knocked once, opened it, and gestured for Natalia to enter. She did, and heard the door close behind her with a soft, final click. The private room was intimate, maybe 15 feet square, dominated by a single table set for 2. Candles flickered in the center. Wine glasses gleamed. And sitting at the far end of the table, watching her with eyes that seemed to catalog every detail of her appearance, was a man who radiated danger like heat from a fire. He was probably in his mid-30s, tall even while sitting, with dark hair styled with careful precision and olive skin that suggested Italian heritage. His suit was clearly expensive, tailored perfectly to broad shoulders and a lean build, the kind of quality that cost more than Natalia made in a month. But it was his eyes that held her attention, a striking shade of green with gray undertones that seemed to shift in the candlelight, intelligent and calculating and completely focused on her. He didn't smile, didn't stand, just watched her with an intensity that made her skin prickle with awareness. And spread across the table in front of him, arranged like evidence at a crime scene, were photographs. Her photographs. Multiple images from her medical examination, different angles, different exposures, showing her back, her side, the curve of her hip where the paper gown had been pulled away. Private moments she'd thought were protected by medical ethics and federal law, displayed casually on white linen like artwork. Natalia's vision tunneled. Her ears rang. Shock hit first, followed immediately by humiliation so intense it felt physical, and then rage. White-hot, clarifying rage that burned through the fear and paralysis. Her hands clenched into fists. Her voice, when it came, shook with fury. "What the hell is this? Who are you?" The man's expression didn't change. He gestured to the chair across from him, a casual movement that somehow felt like a command. "Sit down, Miss Reeves. We have a great deal to discuss." The fact that he knew her name, that he'd clearly been expecting her, that he sat there surrounded by her stolen privacy like it was nothing, sent ice down her spine. But Natalia forced herself to move forward, to pull out the chair, to sit down across from this stranger who held pieces of her vulnerability in his hands. She would get her answers. She would understand what was happening. And then she would make someone pay for this violation. The man leaned back slightly, studying her with those unnerving green-gray eyes. "My name is Dante Moretti," he said, his voice low and controlled, with just a hint of an accent smoothing the edges of his words. "And I believe, Miss Reeves, that you and I have a common enemy." A common enemy. The words hung in the air between them, heavy with implication. Natalia stared at this man, this Dante Moretti, whose name meant nothing to her, but whose presence screamed danger and power. Her gaze dropped to the photographs spread across the table, her private vulnerability displayed like evidence, and rage surged through her again. "I don't care about your enemies," she said, her voice sharper than she'd intended. "I want to know why you have these. How you got them. What gives you the right to violate my privacy like this?" She reached across the table, intending to gather the photographs, to take back some measure of control. But Dante's hand moved faster, collecting the images smoothly and pulling them out of her reach. His movements were controlled, efficient, the kind of physical confidence that came from knowing exactly what his body could do. Natalia's hand hung in the air for a moment before she pulled it back, fingers curling into a fist. "Those belong to me," she said. "No," Dante replied, his voice even. "They belong to a man named Dr. Werner, who sold them to a network that specializes in exploiting vulnerable women. I acquired them before they could be distributed further." "You're welcome." The casual way he said it, the complete lack of emotion, made Natalia want to scream. She gripped the edge of the table instead, her knuckles white. "Distributed." The word made her stomach turn. She forced herself to breathe, to think through the panic trying to claw its way up her throat. "What do you mean, distributed?" Dante leaned forward slightly, his green-gray eyes locked on hers. The candlelight caught the sharp planes of his face, making him look both younger and more dangerous. "6 months ago," he said, "I started investigating a medical clinic on the north side. Dr. Werner's practice. He has a very specific type of patient. Young women, usually between 20 and 30. Attractive, often living alone or new to the city. Women who value their privacy, who wouldn't necessarily have family or friends who'd notice if something was wrong." Natalia felt ice spreading through her chest. That described her perfectly. She'd moved to Chicago 2 years ago for the job, had friends, but no one she saw daily. Kept her life organized and private. The kind of person who could be targeted without raising alarms. Dante continued, his voice steady and clinical. "During routine examinations, Werner takes photographs. Always with some medical justification. A birthmark, a mole, a skin irregularity. He tells patients it's for their records, for comparison over time. Standard procedure. Most women don't question it because he's a doctor and they trust the system to protect them. But it doesn't, Natalia said quietly. The system didn't protect me at all. No, Dante agreed. It didn't. Because Werner isn't documenting for medical purposes. He's creating inventory. Those photographs, along with patient information pulled from your records, are sold to men who want leverage over women. Sometimes for blackmail. Sometimes for stalking. Sometimes for worse. The words hit Natalia like physical blows. Her mind raced through the implications, imagining strangers looking at her images, having access to her address, her workplace, her daily routine. She thought she might be sick. How many? She whispered. How many women? At least 30 that we've confirmed, Dante said. Probably more. Werner's been doing this for at least 3 years. You're one of his more recent acquisitions. Acquisitions? The word made her feel like merchandise, like an object to be bought and sold. She pressed her hand to her stomach, trying to steady herself. Why are you investigating this? Who are you, really? Something shifted in Dante's expression, a crack in the controlled exterior. Pain flickered across his face, brief but unmistakable, before the mask settled back into place. 2 years ago, he said slowly, my younger sister went to a clinic for a routine exam. Different clinic, different doctor, but the same network. They took photographs of her, used them to blackmail her into silence about an assault by the son of one of their clients. She was 21, an art student, full of life and hope and plans for the future. Was, Natalia noticed. Past tense. Her anger cooled slightly, replaced by growing dread. She took her own life 8 months later, Dante said, his voice carefully controlled but his hands clenched on the table. She couldn't live with the violation, with feeling powerless and exposed. She left a note explaining everything, but by then the evidence was gone. The clinic had closed, the doctor had moved, and the network had covered its tracks. I've spent the last 18 months hunting every person involved in what happened to Isabella. Werner is one piece of a much larger operation. The vulnerability in his eyes, the carefully suppressed grief, cut through Natalia's defenses. This wasn't just business for him. It was personal. It was justice for someone he'd lost. She found herself seeing him differently, not just as a dangerous stranger, but as someone who understood violation, who understood the helplessness she was feeling right now. I'm sorry, she said quietly. About your sister. Dante nodded once, a sharp movement that suggested he didn't trust himself to say more. Then he straightened, his businessman mask sliding back into place. But the moment of vulnerability had changed something between them. Natalia could feel it, a subtle shift from pure antagonism to something more complicated. What happens to the photos now? She asked. The ones Werner takes? They're uploaded to a private auction site, Dante explained. Encrypted, invitation only, catering to wealthy men with specific appetites for control and exploitation. The auction goes live periodically. Your photos are scheduled to go up tonight at midnight, along with your full patient file, your address, your employment information, your daily routine as documented through social media and other sources. Everything someone would need to find you, to approach you, to use that information however they see fit. Natalia felt the blood drain from her face. Tonight, in just a few hours, her privacy would be completely destroyed, her safety compromised, her life exposed to whoever had enough money and enough cruelty to bid on it. She stood abruptly, her chair scraping against the floor, needing to move, to do something, anything. We have to stop it, she said. We have to shut it down. Call the police, the FBI, someone with authority. Dante remained seated, watching her pace. I have contacts in law enforcement, he said carefully. But this network has protection. Judges, politicians, police officers. All on their payroll. Going through official channels would alert them before we could act. They'd shut down the site, destroy evidence, disappear before anyone could build a case. And Werner would walk free to start again somewhere else. So what do we do? Natalia demanded, spinning to face him. Just let it happen? No, Dante said, and something dangerous flickered in his eyes. We shut it down ourselves. But I need your help to do it properly. To make sure Werner and everyone else involved goes to prison, I need evidence that ties him directly to the larger operation. I need testimony from a victim who can put him in the room taking those photographs. I need you. Natalia stopped pacing, her mind racing. He was asking her to become part of this, to actively participate in whatever he was planning. Every instinct screamed at her not to trust him, not to get involved with a man who clearly operated outside the law. But what were her alternatives? The police had dismissed her. The clinic had stonewalled her. And in a few hours, her photos would be sold to the highest bidder if she did nothing. Why should I trust you? She asked. You could be anyone. You could be part of this network yourself. This could all be some elaborate scheme. You shouldn't trust me, Dante said bluntly. I'm not a good man, Miss Reeves. I operate in worlds that would horrify you. But I'm also the only person who's telling you the truth about what's happening and offering you a way to fight back instead of remaining a victim. So you have a choice. You can walk out of here right now, go home, hope that whoever buys your information tonight doesn't do anything terrible with it. Or you can stay, work with me, and we'll destroy this network together. He stood finally, moving around the table with predatory grace. Up close, he was even more imposing, easily 6'2", with broad shoulders that filled out his expensive suit and an intensity that made her hyper-aware of his presence. But he stopped a careful distance away, not crowding her, giving her space to decide. Natalia studied him, trying to see past the controlled exterior to whatever truth lay beneath. She noticed his hands, broad and capable, with scarred knuckles that suggested violence, but held with careful restraint. She noticed the way he'd positioned himself between her and the door, not blocking her exit, but placing himself as a barrier between her and any external threat. Protective instinct, even towards someone who had no reason to trust him. What would I have to do? She asked finally. Come with me now to a safe location, Dante said. Somewhere Werner and his associates can't reach you. Tomorrow, we'll go over everything I know about the operation, prepare your testimony, coordinate with my FBI contact who's been building a case from his end. When we have enough evidence, we'll move against them. All of them. And in the meantime, I'm supposed to just trust that you'll keep me safe? That you're not lying about all of this? Dante's expression softened slightly, the first real emotion breaking through his controlled facade. You don't have to trust me, he said quietly. But I promise you, Miss Reeves, I will keep you safe. I failed to protect my sister. I won't fail again. The raw honesty in his voice, the pain barely concealed, made Natalia's decision. She had two impossible choices: remain vulnerable and alone, hoping the system that had already failed her would somehow start working, or accept help from a dangerous man who at least admitted what he was. Neither option was good, but one gave her a chance to fight back, to reclaim some agency over what was happening to her. All right, she said, her voice steadier than she felt. I'll work with you, but I want to know everything. No secrets, no surprises. And if I decide this isn't right, if I want out, you let me walk away. Agreed, Dante said. He pulled out his phone, typed something quickly, then looked back at her. My car is waiting in the alley behind the restaurant. We should go now. The longer you stay in public, the more vulnerable you are. Natalia took a deep breath, committing to this insane course of action. She followed Dante through a back exit, down a narrow hallway that smelled of garlic and wine, and out into the cold November night. A sleek black car waited, engine running, a man in a dark suit standing beside it. Dante opened the back door, gestured for her to get in, then followed her inside. The car moved smoothly into traffic. Natalia watched the city lights blur past, feeling like she was leaving her normal life behind with every block. Dante sat beside her, his presence both comforting and terrifying, making a few quiet phone calls in Italian that she couldn't follow. 20 minutes later, they pulled up in front of a high-rise building in the Gold Coast neighborhood, the kind of address that meant serious money. Dante led her through a pristine lobby, into a private elevator that required a key card, and up to the top floor. The doors opened directly into a penthouse that took Natalia's breath away. Floor-to-ceiling windows overlooked the city, lights spreading out like stars below them. The space was massive, all modern furniture in blacks and grays. Artwork that probably cost more than Natalia made in a year, the kind of cold elegance that felt more like a showroom than a home. The guest room is this way, Dante said, leading her down a hallway. He opened a door to reveal a bedroom larger than her entire studio apartment, with a king-sized bed, its own bathroom, and windows overlooking Lake Michigan. There are clothes in the closet that should fit you. Bathroom is fully stocked. You'll be safe here. My security team monitors the building. No one gets up here without my permission. He handed her a phone, sleek and new. Burner phone, he explained. Untraceable. My number is programmed in. You need anything, you call. Don't use your personal phone. They could be tracking it. Natalia took the phone, the reality of her situation settling over her like a weight. She was in a stranger's penthouse, trusting him to protect her from a threat she barely understood, her normal life suspended indefinitely. It was insane. It was necessary. And she had no idea if she'd made the right choice. Have you ever had to choose between two impossible options? Between staying vulnerable or trusting someone dangerous? Between the devil you know and the devil you don't? Drop your state in the comments and let me know. Sometimes survival means accepting help from unexpected places, even when every instinct says to run. Get some rest, Dante said, his voice gentler than before. Tomorrow we'll go over everything. Make a plan. Tonight, you're safe. I promise. He left, closing the door behind him. Natalia stood alone in the luxurious room, listening to the city hum 40 floors below, and wondered what she'd just gotten herself into. But beneath the fear and uncertainty, something else stirred. Anger. Determination. The beginning of hope that maybe, just maybe, she could take back what had been stolen from her. And Dante Moretti, dangerous as he was, had just given her the first real chance at justice she'd had since this nightmare began. Natalia woke to unfamiliar silence. No traffic noise filtering through thin walls, no neighbors moving around in adjacent apartments, no familiar sounds of her cramped studio. For a moment, disoriented by sleep, she thought she'd dreamed everything. Then she opened her eyes to floor-to-ceiling windows framing a view of Lake Michigan stretching toward the horizon, gray water meeting gray sky, and reality crashed back. She was in Dante Moretti's penthouse. Her medical photos had been stolen. Her privacy had been violated. And she'd agreed to work with a man who admitted he operated outside the law to destroy the network responsible. She sat up slowly, taking in the luxurious guest room in daylight. The bed was enormous. The sheets probably had a thread count higher than her rent. Everything was pristine, expensive, the kind of wealth that felt intimidating rather than comfortable. She checked the burner phone on the nightstand. 7:30 in the morning. She'd slept maybe 4 hours, her mind too restless with questions and fears and the strange situation she'd landed in. Natalia got up, found the bathroom stocked with unopened toiletries, designer brands she'd only seen in magazines. She showered quickly, feeling like an intruder in this polished space, then explored the closet. As Dante had promised, there were clothes in her size, still with tags attached. Leggings, sweaters, jeans, all casual but expensive. She chose black leggings and an oversized gray sweater, the kind of armor comfort she needed right now. She ventured out into the penthouse cautiously, following the smell of coffee. The main living area looked different in daylight, less intimidating, the modern furniture arranged to take advantage of the spectacular views. She found Dante in the kitchen, standing at the counter with a coffee mug in his hand, staring out at the city below. He'd changed too. Instead of the expensive suit, he wore dark jeans and a charcoal Henley that fit his broad shoulders in a way that made Natalia suddenly very aware of his physicality. His dark hair was slightly damp, like he'd showered recently, and without the suit and the controlled businessman persona, he looked younger. Still dangerous, but more human, more real. He turned when he heard her footsteps, and something flickered across his face. Not quite a smile, but a softening of his usual intensity. "Good morning," he said. "Coffee, please," Natalia replied, her voice still rough from sleep. He poured her a mug without asking how she took it, added cream and 1 sugar, and handed it to her. She stared at him, surprised. "How did you know?" "I pay attention," he said simply, gesturing to one of the bar stools at the kitchen island. "Sit. Have you eaten?" "Not yet," she admitted, settling onto the stool and wrapping her hands around the warm mug. The coffee was perfect, exactly how she liked it, and that small consideration made her throat tight for reasons she couldn't quite explain. Dante moved around the kitchen with comfortable efficiency, pulling eggs and bread from the refrigerator, finding a pan, starting breakfast like it was something he did regularly. It was strange, domestic, completely at odds with everything she knew about him. Mafia connections, investigations, dangerous networks. And here he was, making her scrambled eggs. "How did you sleep?" he asked, his back to her as he worked at the stove. "Not great," Natalia admitted. "Hard to sleep when your life has been turned upside down." He glanced over his shoulder at her, understanding in his green-gray eyes. "I know," he said quietly. "I understand." And somehow, she thought he did. He'd lost his sister to this same violation, this same network. He knew what it felt like to have safety ripped away, to feel exposed and helpless. It created a strange connection between them, this shared understanding of trauma. "Can I ask about her?" Natalia said hesitantly. "Your sister, Isabella." Dante was quiet for a moment, his movements at the stove slowing. Then he nodded. "She was 21, he said, his voice careful and controlled. "An art student at the School of the Art Institute. She was talented, really talented. Painting mostly. Abstract work that somehow captured emotion in color and shape. She was full of life, always laughing, always seeing beauty in things the rest of us overlooked." He plated the eggs, added toast, set the food in front of Natalia, then leaned against the counter across from her. "She used to say I was too serious, that I needed to learn to see the world the way she did. Maybe she was right." The pain in his voice, barely restrained, made Natalia's chest ache. "I'm sorry," she said softly. "I have a younger brother. He's 19, studying engineering at Ohio State. I can't imagine losing him. Can't imagine that kind of pain." Dante met her eyes, and for a moment the mask dropped completely. Raw grief stared back at her, the kind that never really healed, just learned to exist beneath the surface. Then he straightened, the businessman persona sliding back into place. "Eat," he said. "We have work to do." Natalia ate the simple breakfast, surprised by how good it was, how thoughtful. When she finished, Dante led her to an office off the main living area. It was more utilitarian than the rest of the penthouse, dominated by a large desk with multiple monitors, file cabinets, a printer, and a wall covered with what looked like investigation materials. Photos, documents, strings connecting different pieces of information. She felt like she'd stepped into a crime drama. "This is everything I've gathered over the last 6 months, Dante explained, moving to stand beside the desk. "Financial records from Werner's clinic showing payments that don't match legitimate medical billing. Patient files obtained from other victims who came forward. Communication logs from encrypted messaging apps. And here," he tapped one of the monitors, "this is the auction site." Natalia leaned in, looking at the screen. It showed what looked like a high-end shopping site, elegant design, but the products listed made her stomach turn. Women's profiles, ages, locations, preview images blurred but clearly intimate. Each listing had a starting bid and a countdown timer. It was horrifying, clinical, treating human privacy like merchandise. "Your listing was supposed to go live at midnight," Dante said. "I managed to intercept it before it posted. But there are others scheduled. And Werner is just one supplier. There are 3 other doctors we've identified in the network, all operating the same way. Different clinics, different neighborhoods, but same system." Natalia pulled up a chair, her bookkeeper instincts kicking in despite her revulsion. "Show me the financial records," she said. "If they're moving money, there's a trail." They spent the morning working through documents together. Natalia was good with numbers, had spent years reconciling budgets and tracking expenses, and she brought that analytical skill to the evidence Dante had gathered. She spotted patterns he'd missed, shell companies that appeared across multiple transactions, timing that suggested coordination between the different clinics. Dante watched her work with growing respect, occasionally leaning over her shoulder to see what she'd found, and Natalia became hyper-aware of his presence. His cologne, something subtle and expensive, the heat radiating from his body. The way he focused completely when she explained a connection she'd discovered, like her words were the most important thing in his world. Around noon, there was a knock at the penthouse door. Dante checked a security camera feed, then went to answer it. He returned with a man in his late 20s, dark suit, nervous energy that reminded Natalia of a coiled spring. "This is Marco," Dante said. "My second." Marco nodded respectfully at Natalia, his eyes curious but professional. "Miss Reeves," he said. "Good to meet you. I brought lunch." He set bags of Italian takeout on the kitchen island, and Natalia realized she was starving. They ate together, the 3 of them, Marco updating Dante on various business matters in careful language that didn't specify exactly what business they were discussing. But Natalia could read between the lines. Shipments, meetings, territory. This was the other side of Dante's life, the criminal enterprise he'd admitted to running. Marco treated him with absolute respect bordering on reverence, and treated Natalia like she was under Dante's protection, which meant she deserved courtesy and care. After lunch, Marco left, and they returned to the files. The afternoon passed in intense focus, Natalia's background in finance proving invaluable as she traced money through dummy accounts and offshore holdings. By 4 o'clock, they'd identified 3 other doctors confirmed to be part of the network, all funneling money to a central account registered to a company called Kozlov Holdings. Kozlov, Dante said, his voice hardening. Viktor Kozlov, Russian immigrant, made his fortune in various gray market enterprises, now runs this exploitation network along with prostitution rings and blackmail operations. He's the one we need to take down to destroy this completely. Natalia stared at the name on the screen, committing it to memory. This was the man responsible, the one who'd created the system that had violated her and dozens of other women. She wanted him to pay, wanted him to feel even a fraction of the helplessness his victims felt. Dante's phone rang, interrupting her thoughts. He checked the screen, frowned, and answered. The conversation was brief, in Italian, his voice growing more tense with each word. When he hung up, his expression was grim. "We have a problem," he said. "Kozlov knows someone's been investigating. He's put word out, offering money for information about who's asking questions about his operation. My sources say he's looking specifically at this address." Natalia's blood ran cold. "They know where I am. They know someone's been looking into Werner's clinic, and they're trying to figure out who. This penthouse is secure, but I don't want to take chances. We need to move you somewhere safer. Tomorrow, we'll go to my family estate outside the city. It's more defensible, harder to approach without being seen." The casual way he said it, like moving her to a different location was simple logistics, reminded Natalia that this was his world. Threats, security concerns, tactical decisions. She was completely out of her depth. That evening, Dante ordered dinner from an upscale restaurant, pasta dishes and wine delivered by a man who clearly knew him and asked no questions. They ate at the dining table, the city lights spreading out below them as twilight faded to night. The wine loosened something in both of them, the constant tension easing slightly. "How did you end up in this life?" Natalia asked, gesturing vaguely to encompass the penthouse, the investigation, everything. "You don't seem like someone who chose this." Dante was quiet for a moment, swirling wine in his glass. "I didn't choose it," he said finally. "I was born into it. My grandfather came to Chicago from Sicily in the 50s, established the family business. My father expanded it. When he died 10 years ago, the responsibility fell to me and my brothers. I was 23. I could have walked away, but family loyalty matters. Honor matters. So I took on the role, tried to do it with some integrity, tried to protect our people and minimize harm. It's not the life I would have chosen, but it's the life I have. Do you regret it?" Natalia asked. "Sometimes," he admitted, "when I see what normal people have. Simplicity, safety, the luxury of not constantly calculating threats and angles. But then I think about the people who depend on me, the good I can do even from this position. Taking down networks like Kozlov's. Protecting people who can't protect themselves. Maybe this is where I'm supposed to be." Natalia studied him across the table, seeing past the dangerous exterior to the complexity beneath. He was trying, in his way, to do something good with the power he had. It didn't excuse his criminal connections, didn't make him safe, but it made him human. Real. "What about you?" Dante asked. "How does a bookkeeper from Ohio end up alone in Chicago, trusting enough to go to a new doctor without questioning?" She smiled sadly. "I wanted independence. Wanted to prove I could make it on my own in a big city. My parents were supportive but worried. Small-town people, you know? They thought Chicago was dangerous. Ironic, considering. I worked hard, kept my head down, tried to do everything right, and still ended up violated by someone who was supposed to help me." "You didn't do anything wrong," Dante said firmly. "This isn't your fault. Werner and Kozlov are predators. They look for people who trust the system, who follow the rules. Your trust wasn't weakness. It was normal, human. They exploited that." Natalia felt tears prick her eyes at the validation, the understanding. She blinked them back, not wanting to break down in front of him. "You're brave," Dante continued, his voice softer. For not falling apart. For fighting back. I'm barely holding on, Natalia admitted. I'm terrified. Angry. I feel like my whole life has been upended, and I have no control over anything. Dante reached across the table, his hand covering hers where it rested on the white tablecloth. The touch was warm, solid, electric. You have more control than you think, he said. You made the choice to fight. That takes real courage. Natalia's breath caught. She stared at their hands, his larger and scarred from violence, hers smaller and trembling slightly. The contact sent awareness shivering up her arm, made her hyper-conscious of him, of the attraction she'd been trying to ignore all day. This was insane. She shouldn't be feeling this way about him. Shouldn't be noticing the way candlelight caught in his eyes, or the way his thumb moved gently against her hand. But she was. God help her, she was. They both pulled back at the same moment, the intensity too much, too confusing. Dante cleared his throat, picking up his wine glass. We should get some rest, he said. Early start tomorrow for the drive to the estate. Natalia nodded, standing on unsteady legs. Thank you, she said. For dinner. For everything today. He walked her to the guest room, pausing at the door. Lock this if it makes you feel safer, he said. But you don't need to. You're safe here. I promise. After he left, Natalia closed the door and leaned against it, her heart racing. She was attracted to him. To a man who ran criminal operations, who admitted he wasn't good, who lived in a world of violence and danger. It was the worst possible reaction to have. But lying in the enormous bed later, staring at the ceiling, she couldn't stop thinking about the warmth of his hand over hers, the understanding in his eyes, the way he'd made her feel protected despite everything. She was in serious trouble, and not just from Kozlov's network. She was falling for Dante Moretti, and she had no idea what to do about it. The drive to the Moretti estate took almost 2 hours, heading west into rolling countryside that looked nothing like the Chicago Natalia knew. Dante drove himself, a sleek black SUV with tinted windows, and she sat in the passenger seat watching the city give way to suburbs and then farmland and vineyards. They didn't talk much, but the silence felt comfortable, companionable, like they'd moved past the need to fill every moment with words. The estate appeared suddenly, a long driveway lined with bare trees leading to a sprawling stone house that looked like it had been transplanted from Tuscany. The main building was 3 stories of honey-colored stone with shuttered windows and terracotta roof tiles, surrounded by acres of dormant vineyards stretching toward distant hills. It was beautiful, isolated, the kind of place where you could forget the rest of the world existed. Dante parked in front of the house and came around to open her door, a gesture of courtesy that felt natural rather than performative. As they approached the entrance, the heavy wooden door opened and a woman appeared, elegant and striking despite her years. She was maybe in her late 50s, with dark hair threaded with silver pulled back in a simple twist, olive skin that showed few wrinkles, and the same green-gray eyes as Dante. She wore tailored slacks and a cream sweater, pearls at her throat, and her smile was genuine as she looked at Natalia. You must be Miss Reeves, she said, her voice warm with just a hint of an Italian accent. Welcome to our home. I'm Francesca Moretti. Natalia felt suddenly awkward, aware of how strange this situation was. Dante's mother welcoming her like a guest rather than someone hiding from criminals. But Francesca's warmth seemed genuine, and Natalia found herself relaxing slightly. Thank you for having me, Mrs. Moretti, she said. Please, call me Francesca. Come in, come in. You must be exhausted from the drive. The interior of the house was as beautiful as the exterior, all exposed beams and stone walls, comfortable furniture that looked lived in rather than decorative, family photographs covering surfaces. It felt like a home, not a showpiece, and the contrast to Dante's cold penthouse was striking. Francesca led them to the kitchen, massive and old-world with a wooden table that could seat 12 and windows overlooking the vineyard. She insisted on making them lunch, moving around the kitchen with practiced ease, and Natalia found herself drawn into conversation about her work, her family, her life before this nightmare began. Francesca listened with genuine interest, asked thoughtful questions, and somehow made Natalia feel like a valued guest rather than someone under protection. Dante watched the interaction, something soft in his expression that Natalia had never seen before. This was a different version of him, here in his family home with his mother. Less guarded, more at peace. That evening, Francesca prepared a proper family dinner, insisting that Natalia help if she felt comfortable. They worked together in the kitchen, Francesca teaching her how to make fresh pasta, telling stories about Dante and his brothers as children, about Isabella and her art. There was grief in her voice when she spoke of her daughter, but also love and pride, memories treasured rather than locked away. She had such light in her, Francesca said quietly, her hands working dough. After we lost her, Dante changed. Became harder, more focused on justice, on protecting others. He blames himself, for not seeing the signs, not knowing she was in trouble. I tell him it wasn't his fault, but he doesn't listen. Natalia's chest tightened. She'd known Dante's investigation was personal, but hearing the depth of his guilt added another layer to her understanding of him. Dinner was family style, passed around the table, and despite the circumstances that had brought her here, Natalia felt something unfamiliar. Safety, belonging, like she'd stepped into a different world where warmth and connection mattered more than the darkness they were fighting against. After dinner, Dante asked if she wanted to see the grounds. The sun was setting, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink, and they walked together through the dormant vineyard. Their breath misted in the cold November air, and Natalia wrapped her arms around herself against the chill. Here, Dante said, shrugging out of his jacket and draping it over her shoulders. The leather was warm from his body, smelled like his cologne, and Natalia pulled it closer, feeling enveloped by his presence. They walked in silence for a while, following paths between bare vines, until they reached a small stone wall at the edge of the property overlooking a valley. The view was spectacular, the last light catching on distant hills, the world peaceful and quiet. Did you ever want a different life? Natalia asked, breaking the silence. Something normal, away from all this? Dante was quiet for a long moment, his gaze fixed on the horizon. Every day, he said finally. When I was younger, I thought about it constantly. Leaving, starting over somewhere no one knew my name or my family. But then my father died, and my brothers needed me, and the business needed leadership. And after Isabella, he paused, his voice roughening. After Isabella, I couldn't leave. I had to finish what she started, had to make sure no one else suffered the way she did. He turned to look at Natalia, and the vulnerability in his eyes made her breath catch. You're the first person who's made me think maybe there could be something else, he said quietly. Maybe after we finish this, after Kozlov and Werner and all of them are behind bars, maybe I could actually walk away. Build something different. What would you want? Natalia asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Peace, Dante said simply. A life where I don't calculate threats and angles constantly. Where I can wake up in the morning without wondering who might come for me. Where I could, he hesitated, have a real relationship. A family. Normal things. The longing in his voice broke something open in Natalia's chest. She stepped closer, drawn by instinct and emotion she couldn't name. I'm sorry, she said, for everything you've lost, everything you've sacrificed. Don't apologize, Dante said. I made my choices, but I'm sorry for what happened to you. For the violation, the fear, the way Werner and his network made you feel powerless. I promise you, Natalia, I will make them pay. Every single person who was part of this. They'll answer for what they did to you and every other woman they exploited. The intensity in his voice, the protective fury barely restrained, should have frightened her. But instead, Natalia felt safe, seen, valued in a way she'd never experienced before. She believed him, trusted that he would do exactly what he promised. And somewhere in the last 2 days, despite every reason not to, she'd started trusting him with more than just her safety. I believe you, she said. I trust you. Something shifted in Dante's expression, surprise and emotion flickering across his face. He reached out slowly, giving her time to pull away, and traced her cheek with gentle fingers. She's beautiful in the fading light, with determination in her eyes despite everything she'd been through. Strong, even when she felt broken. They walked back to the house as full darkness fell, close enough that their hands brushed occasionally, both hyper-aware of every point of contact. Inside, Francesca had retired to her rooms, leaving them alone in the warm kitchen. Dante offered wine, and they sat at the massive table, talking about nothing and everything, the conversation flowing easily now that some barrier between them had crumbled. Dante showed her to a guest room on the second floor, larger and warmer than the penthouse bedroom, with exposed beams and a fireplace and windows overlooking the vineyard. He'd lit the fire earlier, and the room glowed with warmth. He lingered at the door, clearly reluctant to leave. "Sleep well," he said. "My room is just down the hall if you need anything." Natalia's heart was racing. Every rational part of her brain screamed that this was a terrible idea, that she barely knew him, that he was dangerous and connected to crime and completely wrong for her. But another part, the part that had grown louder over the last 2 days, didn't care about rational. That part wanted him to stay, wanted to stop fighting the attraction that had been building since that first moment in the restaurant. "Don't go," she said before she could stop herself. "Stay. Talk to me. I don't want to be alone." The words hung between them, weighted with meaning beyond their surface. Dante's expression shifted, desire and conflict warring in his eyes. "Natalia," he said, his voice rough, "you've been through trauma. Your emotions are complicated right now. I don't want to take advantage." "You're not," she said, stepping closer. "I'm asking you to stay. I'm making this choice. I know it's crazy. I know the timing is terrible, but I feel something when I'm with you. Something I've never felt before. Safe and seen, and like maybe I'm not broken." "You're not broken," Dante said fiercely, closing the distance between them. "You're one of the strongest people I've ever met." "Then stay," Natalia whispered. For a long moment, he just looked at her, searching her face for certainty. Then his hand came up to cup her cheek, warm and gentle, and he leaned down slowly. The kiss started tentative, questioning, giving her every opportunity to change her mind. But Natalia rose on her toes, pressing closer, her hands finding his shoulders, and the kiss deepened. It was electric, consuming, unlike anything she'd experienced. His other arm wrapped around her waist, pulling her against him, and she felt the controlled strength in his body, the restraint even in passion. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, he rested his forehead against hers. "Are you sure?" he asked quietly. "Because once we cross this line, everything changes." "I'm sure," Natalia said, and she was. This might be reckless, might be a mistake, but it was her choice, her decision. And after having so much taken from her, reclaiming this felt like power. They moved together toward the bed, hands exploring, clothes sliding away, and Natalia felt nervous and exhilarated and wanted all at once. Dante was careful with her, attentive, checking in with touches and glances, making sure she was present and willing at every stage. There was an emotional intensity to it that transcended the physical, a connection forging between them that felt profound. Afterwards, wrapped in his arms with the firelight casting shadows across the walls, Natalia felt something shift inside her. The violation that had happened in that clinic, the powerlessness, was still there. But lying here with Dante, safe and cherished and seen, she felt like maybe she could heal. Maybe she could take back what had been stolen and build something new from the wreckage. "I didn't expect this," she whispered against his chest. "Didn't expect you." His arms tightened around her. "Neither did I," he admitted. "I thought I was just helping someone in trouble, getting justice for my sister. But you, Natalia, you've gotten under my skin. Made me want things I thought I'd given up on." "Like what?" she asked. "Like this," he said simply. "Like connection. Like maybe building a life with someone instead of just existing in the darkness." She lifted her head to look at him, seeing vulnerability in his expression that matched what she was feeling. "I'm terrified," she admitted, "of how much I've let you in. How quickly this is happening." "Me too," Dante said, and the honesty in his voice made her trust him even more. But maybe that's how it works sometimes. Maybe some connections are just meant to be immediate. They fell asleep tangled together, and for the first time since seeing that first text message with her stolen photo, Natalia slept deeply and without fear. Morning came with weak sunlight filtering through the windows and the smell of coffee drifting up from downstairs. Natalia woke wrapped in Dante's arms, his steady breathing telling her he was still asleep. She took a moment to study him in the morning light, the sharp planes of his face softened by sleep, the vulnerability that only appeared when his guard was down. Her heart did something complicated in her chest, a mix of affection and desire and dawning realization that this was more than attraction. This was real. His eyes opened, immediately focusing on her, and he smiled. A real smile, unguarded and warm. "Good morning," he said, his voice rough from sleep. "Good morning," she replied. They dressed slowly, reluctant to leave the bubble of intimacy they'd created. But reality was waiting downstairs in the form of Marco, who'd arrived early and was having coffee with Francesca in the kitchen. He stood when they entered, his expression carefully neutral, but his eyes knowing. "Boss," he said to Dante, "we've got news. My contact came through. They located Kozlov's main operation facility." Dante's entire demeanor shifted, the protective lover replaced by the focused strategist. "Where?" "Warehouse district on the south side," Marco said. "Heavy security, but my guy got eyes on it yesterday. Kozlov's there regularly. We move now, we can catch him and shut down the whole network." Natalia felt her pulse accelerate. This was it. The chance to take down the man responsible for her violation and so many others. "She wants to be part of it," Dante said, before she could speak. "I want in. I want to help take him down." Dante's expression hardened. "No, it's too dangerous. You stay here where it's safe." Natalia felt anger flare. "You said I had a choice. That I could fight back. This is my violation, Dante. My trauma. I deserve to be part of ending it." They stared at each other, wills clashing. Finally, Dante exhaled roughly. "If you do this, you follow my lead exactly. You don't take risks. You stay behind me at all times. Understood?" "Understood," Natalia agreed. Marco cleared his throat. "Actually, boss, I might have an idea. One that keeps Miss Reeves safer while still using her to get us inside. We've been trying to figure out how to infiltrate without alerting security. But if she goes in as one of Werner's deliveries, wearing a wire, we get Kozlov confessing on tape while our team positions outside." It was risky, terrifying, but also potentially brilliant. Dante looked at Natalia, conflict clear in his expression. He didn't want to put her in danger, but he also respected her enough not to make decisions for her. "I'll do it," Natalia said firmly. "Whatever it takes to bring him down." They spent the rest of the morning planning, going over every detail, preparing for what would essentially be a sting operation with Natalia as bait. It was dangerous, possibly insane, but it was also her best chance at justice. And with Dante beside her, promising to protect her, to extract her the moment anything went wrong, she believed they could do it. They could end this nightmare and finally take back what had been stolen. The morning of the operation, Natalia woke with her heart already racing. Dante was beside her, awake and watching her with an intensity that made her breath catch. They'd spent every night together since that first one, and she'd grown used to waking in his arms, feeling safe despite the danger surrounding them. But today was different. Today she'd walk directly into the heart of that danger. "We don't have to do this," Dante said quietly, his hand tracing gentle patterns on her shoulder. "We can find another way. I can handle Kozlov myself." "No," Natalia said firmly. "We've been over this. This is the best plan. The only way to get enough evidence to bring down the entire network. I can do this." His jaw tightened, conflict clear in his expression. He pulled her closer, burying his face in her hair. "If anything happens to you," he said, his voice rough with emotion, "if anything goes wrong, I'll never forgive myself." "Nothing will go wrong," Natalia said with more confidence than she felt. "You'll be right there. Your team will be positioned. And the FBI is coordinating. We've planned every detail." They rose and dressed in silence, the weight of what was coming settling over them both. Downstairs, Marco was already there with two other men from Dante's security team, all wearing tactical gear and checking weapons with practiced efficiency. Natalia felt surreal watching them prepare, like she'd stepped into a movie rather than her real life. Marco handed her a small device, barely larger than a button. "This is the wire," he explained. "It'll pick up everything within 20 feet and transmit directly to our van. If you need to activate the panic signal, press it 3 times quickly. We'll be inside within 30 seconds. Natalia nodded, her mouth dry. Dante took the wire and carefully attached it to the inside of her bra strap, his hands gentle despite the tension radiating from his body. His eyes met hers, holding for a long moment. "You remember the plan?" he asked. She nodded. "Werner picks me up from the stage location. He thinks I'm being delivered as part of a bulk transfer, 3 women from his clinic. He drives me to Kozlov's facility. Once inside, I get Kozlov talking about the operation while the wire records everything. When you have enough, you extract me and move in with the FBI. And if anything feels wrong," Dante prompted. "I use the safe word," she recited. Mercy. I say it, and you come for me immediately. He cupped her face in his hands, his thumbs stroking her cheeks. I promise you, Natalia, I will come for you. No matter what happens, I will get you out. She believed him, trusted him completely, which was terrifying and comforting all at once. They'd come so far in just a week, from antagonistic strangers to this, whatever this was between them. Something deep and real and worth surviving for. The drive to the staged location was tense. Dante sat beside her in the back of the SUV, holding her hand so tightly it almost hurt, like he could keep her safe through sheer force of will. When they arrived at the address, a dingy office building on the south side, he kissed her hard and desperate. Come back to me, he said against her lips. Always, she promised. Natalia got out alone, walking into the building as planned. Werner was waiting in a first-floor office, looking nervous and sweaty. He barely glanced at her, just gestured for her to follow him to his car in the parking garage. She complied, playing the role of frightened victim, keeping her body language submissive and scared. The drive took 20 minutes. Werner didn't speak to her, just kept checking his mirrors and muttering to himself. Natalia focused on breathing steadily, reminding herself that Dante and his team were following at a distance, that she wasn't truly alone. The wire pressed against her skin, a small reminder of the plan, of the justice they were about to achieve. They arrived at a warehouse district, industrial buildings that looked abandoned but weren't. Werner pulled into a loading dock, and immediately two men appeared, hard-faced and armed. They opened Natalia's door, pulled her out roughly, and she stumbled, fear mixing with adrenaline. Inside, the warehouse had been converted into something that made her stomach turn. Individual rooms, some with locks on the outside. Medical equipment. Cameras set up in various locations. And women. She counted at least 5, some drugged and barely conscious, others terrified and trying to make themselves small. This was the collection point, where victims were processed before being distributed to buyers. Natalia's resolve hardened. This had to end. Today. Now. Werner led her down a hallway to an office at the back. Through the door's window, she could see a man sitting behind a desk, mid-50s with cold eyes and the kind of predatory stillness that made every instinct scream danger. Viktor Kozlov, the man responsible for all of this. Werner knocked, opened the door, pushed Natalia inside. Kozlov looked up from paperwork, his gaze moving over her with clinical assessment, like she was livestock being evaluated. This is one of the 3 from my clinic, Werner said nervously. Clean background, no family in the area, works at a nonprofit. Good target for the professional category. Kozlov stood, moving around the desk with measured steps. He was shorter than Dante, but built solid, and his eyes held a cruelty that made Natalia's skin crawl. Come here, girl, he said, his accent thick. Natalia moved forward on shaking legs, remembering to play frightened and compliant. Kozlov circled her, and she felt his gaze like a physical touch, violating. Very nice, he said. Werner, you've done well this time. These will sell quickly. The professional women always do. Men like the idea of corrupting someone respectable. The casual way he discussed selling human beings made Natalia want to scream, to fight, to claw at his eyes. But she forced herself to stay still, to keep breathing, to let him talk. That was the plan. Get him talking about the operation. How many? She asked quietly, her voice shaking convincingly. How many women have you done this to? Kozlov's eyes narrowed. Ah, she a spirit. I like that. He moved closer, and Natalia had to force herself not to step back. Hundreds, girl. Over 5 years, hundreds of women who thought they were just going to the doctor. Who trusted the system to protect them. But the system protects men like me, not women like you. He was bragging, confirming everything on tape. Natalia needed to push further. And the doctors? How many work for you? Kozlov smiled, a cold expression that didn't reach his eyes. For clinics currently. Werner here, plus Dr. Morrison in Lincoln Park, Dr. Chun in Evanston, and Dr. Patel in Oak Park. They screen patients, identify good targets, take the photos, provide the files. I handle the sales and distribution. Everyone profits. Everyone stays quiet. The police can't touch us because we own half of them. Perfect. He'd just confessed to the entire operation on a recording that would hold up in court. Natalia felt a surge of triumph beneath her fear. They had him. But then Kozlov frowned, his eyes sharpening. How do you know to ask these questions? he said slowly. Most victims are too frightened to speak. Natalia's heart jumped. She'd pushed too far, broken character. I wanted to understand, she stammered. Suddenly, alarms blared through the building. Kozlov's head whipped toward the door, and she heard shouting, the sound of doors being forced open. Someone had spotted Dante's team outside. The infiltration had been detected. Kozlov moved fast, grabbing Natalia's arm in a bruising grip. What is this? He snarled. Who are you? His hand moved over her body, searching, and she tried to pull away, but he was stronger. He found the wire, ripped it from her bra strap, and his face transformed into a mask of rage. You're recording me, he spat. You're working with whoever's outside. He struck her, backhand across the face, and Natalia's head snapped to the side, pain exploding through her jaw. She tasted blood, felt terror surge, but training Dante had insisted on kicked in. She brought her knee up hard into Kozlov's groin, exactly as Dante had taught her, and he doubled over with a grunt of pain. She ran for the door, but Werner blocked her path, and suddenly she was fighting both of them, all the rage and violation of the last week pouring out in desperate strikes. She wasn't trained, wasn't strong enough, but she fought anyway, screaming for help, for Dante, for anyone. Then the office door exploded inward, the lock giving way under force, and Dante was there. His eyes found her immediately, took in the blood on her lip, the bruising already forming on her face, and something terrifying transformed his expression. Pure fury, controlled violence, protective rage that promised destruction. He moved like a predator, fast and precise. Werner went down first, a single strike that left him unconscious on the floor. Kozlov tried to reach for a weapon, but Dante was faster, disarming him and slamming him against the wall. Behind him, Marco and the team secured the room, weapons trained on Kozlov. You put your hands on her, Dante said, his voice deadly quiet. His hand wrapped around Kozlov's throat, lifting him slightly off his feet. You violated her, hurt her, made her feel powerless. Now you're going to know exactly how that feels. Natalia saw murder in Dante's eyes, saw him on the edge of killing Kozlov right there. Don't, she said, her voice cutting through his rage. Don't kill him. He needs to face justice. All those women need to see him convicted, imprisoned, destroyed by the system he thought protected him. Dante's gaze flicked to her, conflict warring in his expression. Then slowly, deliberately, he released Kozlov, letting him drop to the floor gasping. You heard her, Dante said coldly. You get to live, but you'll rot in prison, and every day you'll know that women you tried to destroy are the ones who brought you down. Outside, sirens were approaching. Dante's FBI contact had coordinated a raid perfectly timed with their infiltration. Federal agents swarmed the warehouse, securing evidence, removing victims, arresting everyone involved. Werner begged for a deal, immediately giving up names of other doctors, clients, everyone in the network to save himself. Marco coordinated with the FBI, ensuring they had copies of all of Dante's evidence, the recordings from Natalia's wire, everything needed to prosecute not just Kozlov, but the entire operation. Natalia watched it unfold from the safety of Dante's arms, his hold on her gentle despite the violence still humming through his body. Over the next 6 hours, coordinated raids hit all 4 clinics, arrested the doctors and their staff, shut down the auction site, and seized financial records that would lead to dozens of additional arrests. The network that had operated in shadows for years was being systematically destroyed, pulled into the light, and dismantled. When they finally returned to the estate, the sun was setting and Natalia felt like she'd been wrung out completely. The adrenaline drained away, leaving exhaustion and the weight of what they'd done, what she'd survived. She started shaking in the car and couldn't stop. Dante carried her inside, past his worried mother, up to their room. He set her on the bed gently, checked her injuries with hands that trembled slightly, his control finally cracking. I'm sorry, he said roughly. I should have protected you better. I should have stopped him before he touched you. You did protect me, Natalia said, touching his face, feeling the tension in his jaw. You came for me. You kept your promise. I knew you would. When I saw him hit you, Dante said, his voice breaking, I wanted to kill him. Wanted it more than I've wanted anything. If you hadn't stopped me, I would have. But you didn't, she said. You listened to me. You gave me that choice, that power. That's what matters. He pulled her into his arms, holding her like she was precious and fragile and necessary all at once. "I love you," he said against her hair. "I didn't mean for it to happen, didn't expect it, but I do. I love you, Natalia. You've changed everything." The words hit her like a shock, beautiful and terrifying. She pulled back to look at him, saw the vulnerability and fear and hope in his eyes. "I love you too," she whispered. "It's crazy. It's too fast. I know all the reasons this shouldn't work, but I do. I love you, Dante." He kissed her then, tender and desperate, like he was confirming she was real and safe in his. They held each other as the last light faded from the windows, processing what they'd survived, what they'd accomplished, what they'd found in each other through the darkness. Outside, the world was safer. The network was destroyed. Justice was being served. And inside, wrapped in each other's arms, two people who'd been broken by violence and violation were beginning to heal, finding in each other the strength to build something new from the wreckage. 2 months later, Natalia sat in Dr. Chen's office, a different Dr. Chen than the one who'd been arrested as part of Kozlov's network, and talked about nightmares. This Dr. Chen was a trauma therapist, a woman in her 40s with kind eyes and infinite patience, and over the past 8 weeks, she'd helped Natalia begin the slow process of healing. "The nightmares are less frequent," Natalia said, twisting her hands in her lap. "Maybe twice a week now instead of every night. And when I wake up, Dante's there. He never makes me feel weak or broken for being afraid." "That's important," Dr. Chen said. "Having support while you process trauma. You're doing the work, Natalia. That takes real courage." And she was doing the work. Twice weekly therapy sessions, processing the violation, the fear, the anger, learning to separate what happened to her from her sense of self-worth, understanding that Werner and Kozlov's crimes weren't her fault, weren't something she could have prevented. It was hard, exhausting, some days felt like moving backwards. But slowly, steadily, she was healing. The legal proceedings had been equally exhausting but necessary. Natalia had testified in 4 separate trials over the past 2 months. Werner's trial came first, and she'd sat on the witness stand and calmly, clearly described what he'd done. The fake medical justification, the photographs, the violation of trust between doctor and patient. Werner had been convicted on 17 counts and sentenced to 25 years in federal prison. Kozlov's trial was harder. Facing him across the courtroom, seeing his cold eyes trying to intimidate her, brought back the terror of that warehouse. But Dante had been there every day, sitting in the gallery, his presence a steady anchor. And when she testified about Kozlov's confession, about seeing the other women he'd victimized, about his violence when she was discovered, her voice never wavered. Kozlov was convicted on 63 counts including human trafficking, blackmail, assault, and conspiracy. The judge sentenced him to life without parole. Natalia had cried when the verdict was read, not from sadness but from relief. Justice. Finally. The other 2 doctors, Morrison and Patel, had taken plea deals in exchange for providing evidence against their clients, the men who'd purchased the photos and information. Those trials were ongoing, but convictions were coming. The entire network was being systematically destroyed in courtrooms across the state, and the victims were getting restitution. A fund had been established from seized assets, providing financial compensation and therapy coverage for all 37 confirmed victims. Several had reached out to Natalia, thanking her for her bravery, for standing up when the system had failed them. Those connections, that shared understanding, had become part of her healing too. Her life had transformed in ways she couldn't have imagined 2 months ago. She'd moved most of her belongings to the estate, spending only occasional nights at her studio apartment when work required her to be in the city. The estate felt like home now, with its vineyard views and stone walls and Francesca's warm presence. Dante's mother had essentially adopted her, treating her like the daughter she'd lost, teaching her family recipes and sharing stories, and providing maternal comfort Natalia hadn't realized she needed. Work had been understanding about everything. Her boss at the nonprofit had given her flexible remote options, letting her work from the estate most days. And Natalia had started developing plans for something new. A foundation focused on medical privacy advocacy, providing resources and support for victims of medical exploitation, working to close the legal loopholes that had allowed Kozlov's network to operate. She wanted to turn her pain into purpose, to help prevent what happened to her from happening to others. Dante had changed too. He'd stepped back from the darker aspects of his business operations, delegating to his brothers and focusing more on legitimate enterprises. The vineyard was expanding, producing wine that was gaining recognition. He'd invested in several restaurants and a security consulting firm that operated completely above board. He was building something he could be proud of, and Natalia knew her influence was part of that shift. He wanted to be someone worthy of her, though she kept telling him he already was. That evening, they cooked dinner together in the estate's kitchen, something that had become their routine. Music played from a speaker on the counter, some Italian ballad that Francesca loved, and Natalia moved around the space with comfortable familiarity. She was learning to cook properly under Francesca's patient instruction, though Dante still teased her about her initial attempts at risotto. He stood at the counter chopping vegetables, and she came up behind him, wrapping her arms around his waist and resting her cheek against his back. His hands stilled, and she felt him relax into her touch. "What's this for?" he asked, warmth in his voice. "Just happy," she said simply. "Just grateful for this. For you. For the life we're building." He turned in her arms, his hands coming up to frame her face. "These past 2 months with you have been the best of my life," he said quietly. "Watching you heal, watching you fight in those courtrooms, watching you grow stronger every day. You're extraordinary, Natalia. You know that." She smiled, rising on her toes to kiss him. "You're not so bad yourself," she teased. They finished preparing dinner together, the easy domesticity, something Natalia treasured. Francesca joined them, and they ate family-style around the big kitchen table, talking about the vineyard's spring plans and Natalia's foundation ideas and an art gallery that wanted to feature some of Isabella's work in a memorial exhibition. It was normal, peaceful, the kind of evening that once would have seemed impossible. After dinner, after Francesca retired to her rooms with a knowing smile, Dante asked if Natalia wanted to walk. The sun was setting, painting the sky in those same shades of orange and pink that had marked so many significant moments between them, and they walked hand in hand through the dormant vineyard toward the stone wall overlooking the valley. The view was as spectacular as always, and Natalia leaned into Dante's side, his arm around her shoulders, both of them quiet and content. This had become their spot, the place where they'd first opened up to each other, where they'd begun building trust. Coming back here felt like completing a circle. Dante stopped walking, turning to face her. He took both her hands in his, and something in his expression made her heart skip. There was nervousness there, vulnerability, hope. "These months with you have been the best of my life," he said. "You came into my world when I'd given up on happiness, when I thought all I had left was revenge and responsibility. But you, Natalia, you changed everything. You made me want more, want better, want a future that's about building something beautiful instead of just destroying what's ugly." "Dante," she whispered, emotion tightening her throat. "I never want to lose you," he continued. "Never want to wake up without you beside me. Never want to imagine my life without your strength and your heart and your incredible courage in it. You're home to me, Natalia. The first real home I've had since Isabella died." He released one of her hands, reaching into his pocket, and pulled out a small velvet box. When he opened it, Natalia's breath caught. The ring was stunning, an emerald surrounded by small diamonds, set in gold that looked antique and precious. "This was my grandmother's," Dante said. "She gave it to my grandfather when they married in Sicily 70 years ago. It's been in our family ever since, waiting for the right woman. For the woman who would be a true partner, who would bring honor and strength to the Moretti name. That's you, Natalia. You're that woman." He dropped to one knee on the cold ground, looking up at her with everything he felt written across his face. "Marry me," he said. "Spend your life with me. Let me protect you and cherish you and build something beautiful with you. Be my wife, my partner, my home. Please." Tears streamed down Natalia's face. "Yes," she said immediately, no hesitation, no doubt. "Yes, Dante. Of course yes." He stood, sliding the ring onto her finger where it fit perfectly, like it had been made for her. Then he pulled her into his arms and kissed her, deep and loving and full of promise. When they broke apart, both were crying, both smiling, both holding on to each other like they'd found something precious and irreplaceable. They called her parents that night, video chat with her mom and dad in their Ohio living room. Natalia showed them the ring, introduced Dante properly, explained that she was getting married. Her parents had known she was seeing someone, had heard vague details about the case and Dante's role in helping her, but this was different. This was permanent. Her father was cautious, asking careful questions about Dante's business, his background, his intentions. Dante answered honestly, not hiding his family's history, but emphasizing his legitimate operations and his commitment to Natalia. Her mother watched them together, saw the way Dante looked at her daughter, the way Natalia glowed with happiness, and her concerns softened. "He makes you happy," her mother said finally. "Really happy. I can see it." "He does," Natalia confirmed. "He saved my life, Mom. In every way that matters." "Then that's what matters to us," her father said gruffly. "Welcome to the family, Dante. You take care of our girl." "Always," Dante promised. "That's the easiest promise I've ever made." Francesca was overjoyed when they told her, pulling Natalia into a tight embrace with tears streaming down her face. "Isabella would have loved you," she said. "She would have been so happy to see her brother find someone who makes him whole again. You've brought light back to this family, Natalia." "Thank you." They planned a small wedding for the following month, intimate and private, just family and close friends. Natalia didn't want spectacle or publicity. She wanted meaning, connection, a celebration of what they'd built together from the ashes of trauma. The wedding day arrived with perfect winter sunshine, cold and bright. They'd set up chairs in the vineyard, rows of white arranged with views of the valley beyond, heaters positioned to keep guests warm. Natalia wore a simple ivory dress, elegant and understated, with Isabella's pearl bracelet at her wrist, something borrowed from the sister she'd never met but honored. Dante stood at the altar in a perfectly tailored dark suit, his brothers beside him as groomsmen, and when Natalia walked down the aisle on her father's arm, his expression transformed with wonder and love. The ceremony was short, officiated by a family friend. They'd written their own vows, promises spoken from the heart. Dante promised to protect her always, to honor her strength, to build a life together based on partnership and respect and love. Natalia promised to stand beside him, to help him become the man he wanted to be, to create with him a future neither had dared imagine alone. When the officiant pronounced them married, Dante kissed her like she was precious and necessary in his, and the small gathering of people they loved most applauded and cheered. The reception was held in a heated tent, dinner and dancing and toasts that made them both laugh and cry. Natalia met more of Dante's business associates, men who looked dangerous but treated her with genuine respect as Dante's wife, his partner, not just decoration on his arm. She danced with her father and with Marco and finally with Dante, held close as they swayed to music while the sun set outside. "You're the best thing that ever happened to me," Dante whispered against her ear. "You transformed my life, gave me hope when I'd lost it, made me believe in happiness again." "You saved me," Natalia replied. "In every way a person can be saved. You gave me back my power, my trust, my ability to love. You showed me that protection doesn't have to mean control, that strength can be gentle, that love can heal." They spent their wedding night at the estate, in the room they'd shared since that first night months ago, and Natalia felt complete in a way she'd never experienced. This was where she belonged. With this man, in this life they were building together. 6 months passed in happiness and growth. Natalia's foundation launched in early spring, a small office in downtown Chicago staffed by volunteers and funded by donations from people who believed in the mission. They provided legal resources for victims of medical exploitation, lobbied for stronger privacy protections, offered therapy referrals, and support groups. It gave Natalia purpose, turned her trauma into something that helped others, and she threw herself into the work with passion. Dante's legitimate businesses thrived. The vineyard won awards for their vintage. The restaurants expanded to 3 locations. His criminal connections faded to minimal, enough to maintain family respect, but nothing that would compromise his conscience or his relationship. He was building the kind of legacy he'd always wanted, one he could be proud of. One morning in late spring, Natalia woke in their bedroom, wrapped in Dante's arms as always, sunlight streaming through the windows. She felt different, had felt different for a few days now, and the pregnancy test she'd taken yesterday had confirmed what she suspected. She was pregnant. Early still, maybe 6 weeks, but definitely pregnant. She touched her stomach gently, wonder and joy, and a little fear mixing in her chest. A baby. Their baby. A new life created from the love they'd built together. Dante stirred beside her, his arms tightening around her. He woke slowly, his eyes opening to find her already watching him. "Morning," he murmured, his voice rough from sleep. Then he noticed her expression, the way she was touching her stomach, and he came fully awake. "What is it? Is everything okay?" Natalia smiled, tears pricking her eyes. "Everything's perfect," she said. "Everything's wonderful. Dante, I'm pregnant. We're going to have a baby." For a moment, he just stared at her, processing the words. Then his face transformed with pure joy, wonder and protectiveness and love all at once. He moved his hand to cover hers on her stomach, both of them holding the place where their child was growing. "A baby," he whispered. "Our baby. Natalia." He broke off, overcome, and she saw tears in his eyes. "I'll keep you both safe," he said fiercely. "Always. Both of you. I promise." "I know," she said, her own tears falling. "I trust you, Dante. Completely. That trust you helped me rebuild. It's the foundation of everything we have." He pulled her close, holding her like she was infinitely precious, and they lay together in the morning light, imagining their future. A child running through the vineyard, teaching them about strength and gentleness both, building a family rooted in love and respect and healing. That afternoon, they walked together through the vineyard, new green growth emerging on the vines, promise of harvest months away. Natalia leaned back against Dante's chest, his hands resting protectively on her stomach, both of them looking toward the valley and the future stretching before them. What started as violation and fear had become love and healing. What began with stolen privacy and danger had transformed into partnership and safety. Sometimes, Natalia thought, protection comes from the most unexpected places. Sometimes the person you need is the last one you'd expect to find. And sometimes, from the darkest moments, the most beautiful futures can grow. Have you ever found strength in unexpected places, or discovered that the person you needed was the last one you expected? Sometimes life takes us through darkness to bring us to the light we never knew we were searching for. Thanks for joining this journey. If this story moved you, subscribe for more tales of love and second chances. And comment below about trust, healing, and finding home in unexpected arms. Because sometimes the best love stories are the ones that start when we're at our most broken and someone sees us as whole anyway. They stood together in the vineyard, Dante and Natalia Moretti, looking toward a future they'd built from wreckage, protected by love and healed by trust. And in that moment, surrounded by growing things and possibilities, they were home.